By the power of Poland, I have the power! It's a very beautiful sword, isn't it? Oh my god, is it made of foam? Yes, indeed, it is made of foam. Let's get the old Witcher symbol there. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a foam hand and a half sword from the Witcher series of video games, which I have still not played, unfortunately. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is almost August, literally just a day away, and July was a very good month indeed. I actually went to a local con called not Space City Con, called Comic Palooza. It was very much a Mandalorian-themed comic event, which was quite fitting, seeing as how I went as the Mandalorian. I don't know how those guys fight in those costumes. I don't know how some of those guys on there had the helmet on the entire time. My God, it was hot. And of course, we had to park 3 blocks away, which meant I got to walk through the hot city of Houston in a Mandalorian costume. Which, while it looked very cool, it was very, very hot indeed. But it was a lot of fun, and I've kind of got into this whole cosplay thing, which is why I picked up another costume. You see, I'm not going to go crazy when it comes to cosplay and have like 5 separate outfits, because that's just a bit crazy. But instead, I'm going to have my one sci-fi costume, which is the Mando costume, and my Geralt Arivia costume, which is going to be Geralt's outfit from Season 2 of The Witcher. The Witcher, as a franchise, is something I haven't really gotten into. I'm quite fond of The Witcher in theory, but it's just not something that really draws me to it. I have Witcher 1 and 2, the game. I played some of Witcher 1. I even did some videos on that when, for whatever reason, I couldn't figure out the combat. It's one of those things where you kind of have like a brain meltdown. You see, I thought it required 2 clicks to attack, not 1 click, wait for the little symbol to show up, and then click it again. I'm like, why isn't it working? For some reason, I didn't get it till I was like, oh yeah, maybe I should actually pay attention. I hate it when stuff like that happens. As for the books, I've read The Last Wish, which I found pretty good, and I watched some of the first season of the show, but it's just one of those things. It's like, it's a franchise I know I would like, but I just haven't really gotten around to actually reading it yet, or playing the game, or watching the rest of the show. But I do like the character of Geralt, this sort of hard-edged hero type, which is something I've always been quite fond of. He's not as hard-edged as he might otherwise be. I mean, like, when it comes to heroes, old Clint, he is the true hard-edged hero, whereas Geralt is positively friendly compared to old Mr. Eastwood. So, ladies and gentlemen, also in July, I got some footage for an outdoor excursion I intend to do, which is of me flying around on a helicopter around Galveston. Should be fun. It's only about 8 minutes worth of video, but it turned out remarkably well. I'm kind of moving on from the old GoPro to just using my smartphone. The camera on that's better than the GoPro, and it's more portable, and the phones are taking over the world. So, with that in mind, you'll definitely be seeing some more outdoor excursions coming in the future. With that one and the iFly adventure that I went on, which was a lot of fun as well, just flying through the air with the greatest of ease. There's going to be a gun video in August as well, of a What Would Stoner Do inspired carbine. I already got some preliminary footage for that. It shoots quite well. Gun Jesus is truly wise. Let's see. So, Mech Assault turned out pretty good. I really enjoyed working on that video. I put a lot more effort into that than I might otherwise had. And I think it is one of the best videos I've put out all year, to be honest. I actually got to talk about a new, not a new franchise, but a franchise I hadn't really delved into before. The biggest problem with Mech Assault is just lack of exposure. It's just, that's one of the issues with being such a teeny tiny YouTube channel. No one ever gets to see anything you put out. So be sure to like, comment, rate, and subscribe. I guess that fixes the algorithm, but I'm buried so far. You could comment 1,000 times, and I don't think it would do that much good. But whatever. Upcoming videos is, of course, going to be AVP2 Primal Hunt. I've already started work on that. Then after that, AVP Classic 2000. And then I decided to push Fallout New Vegas to January of 2022. And I'm going to use the slot that I would put that I'd have for Fallout New Vegas for actually 2 game reviews that are going to be they're not going to be simple reviews. They're going to be as long as they need to be, but I'm not going to have any video segments because these take a while. I'm also not going to have my snappy little edits. They're going to be big chunks to describe what's going on in the game. And I'm going to do these, what I like to call expedited reviews on 2 games that I really want to have more exposure. And that's Titanfall 2, which sadly kind of fell off everybody's radar when it came out, I think in 2016. The multiplayer is dead because of hackers, but honestly, I don't really care about multiplayer all that much, so it doesn't really bother me. But the single player is really bloody good. It's an example of how a modern new school game can work quite well. Then the other game is going to be Outer Worlds. Once again, another modern new school game that works really well. I would actually count Outer Worlds with the greats, with the great titans of RPGs, like KOTOR 1 and 2, Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 3. It's more on the Fallout. If KOTOR 2 is like the absolute summit of RPG greatness, then Outer Worlds it's not the nadir, but it's closer to Fallout 3 in terms of writing quality. It's a better game than Fallout 3 to a certain extent, but it's just, the writing in Outer Worlds is not that great, but it's not so awful as to be, it's not that great compared to something like KOTOR 2, let's just put it that way. So it's very high standards, and it meets most of those. The biggest problem with Outer Worlds by far is just the fact that it's trying to be a parody and serious at the same time, and fails at doing both, mostly. It succeeds enough to where it's not terrible, but the thing is, you look at something like, say, BioShock, that's not meant to be 100% serious. Yeah, I'm sure people would debate me on that, but it's a highly stylized universe. I like some stylization. It doesn't have to be 100% serious, but something like BioShock just wouldn't work for a wide variety of reasons, and something like Outer Worlds wouldn't work for a wide variety of reasons. And I think they should have gone for just a pure space opera sort of thing versus we're going to have some atom punk and some people acting really stupid. It just doesn't work 100%. But I'm looking forward to talking about that game because I think it gets more flack than it deserves, but it definitely is a letdown in some areas. Let's see what else we got. There is a book I do recommend called Gun Runners. Initially, I think I mentioned this in another monthly vlog, and I initially thought it was terrible, but once you get past the rather clunky first couple of chapters, it starts to really open up and be quite good. Initially, you might think it's sort of like a Battletech-inspired universe, but it gets a little more real as time goes on. My biggest problem with the Battletech universe by far is it just doesn't feel real enough. It feels like it's a universe very much crafted to make giant robots beating, well, they're not really robots, mechs beating the crap out of each other make sense, and it doesn't make sense. I have a somewhat positive view of humanity, and one of the things in the Battletech universe is humanity is basically a bunch of sociopathic killers that are constantly nuking the shit out of each other, and they nuke the shit out of each other so much that eventually you have what's called the Ares conventions, where war is basically turned into a game. I don't see this happening for a variety of reasons. I mean, we look at, the absolute hell of World War I and II, and now people are, in many respects, a little less, let's kill everybody sort of thing, and I think by the future, people are going to be even less likely to, let's wipe out all of humanity multiple times over because, territory. I know that might seem very much a naive concept, but it's just one of those things where we look at what happens when things do get wiped out. You get revolts, you get revolutions, basically people don't want to kill everyone and they don't want to be killed by everyone. We look at the Cold War, and there's many ways that could have gone, and people did, blink, because they don't necessarily want to wipe out all of humanity. I think that's a lesson we don't really take away from history. We like to cherry pick history, to sort of prove our point, but we just kind of look at it, it's like, as time has gone on throughout the 20th century, people kind of saw the whole kill everyone thing and started to take a few steps back from that. Because if we use Battletech logic, then technically Truman should have nuked the shit out of China, but he didn't do it. So yeah, it's one of those things where the mechs coming in and killing everybody. I get it; they have to make it make sense, but it still doesn't make sense to me. And then, of course, you get into the mainline Battletech universe where, we've gone past the succession wars and we have these little mercenary companies that are going around blowing a few things up, and I don't see a government functioning like that. And then the clanners are even worse. There's an invasion from the clanners from like the outer periphery, and they invade the inner sphere, and they have this, warrior mentality where, they place a bid on how many people are going to attack a certain planet, and they place a minimum bid so they don't look bad, but overwhelming force is a thing, and it has been since the early 1900s. So it annoys me on a I can't suspend the disbelief to really appreciate Battletech. I like the series, I like the games, I'm definitely more into it now than I was in the past, but it's just, yeesh. It's just like, make more sense. So yeah, let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, for those wondering why I'm sporting a spiffy beard, is because I'm waiting to shave for my grandfather's 81st birthday, which is in a couple of days as of this recording. It's gonna be an epic day, to say the least. So, birthdays and Battletechs aside, this month's philosophical concept delves into the concept of individuality. Now, I've talked about this a lot, but, as I've gone through my own personal development over the last, decade or so, I've started to, question some of my long-held beliefs. Now, these aren't political beliefs. Political beliefs are generally the purview of people who have nothing else better to do in their lives other than just follow their little sports teams. People who talk about politics all the time really need to get a hobby, or multiple hobbies, other than just following, ooh, what did this person say, or ooh, what did that person say, For me, I'm less inclined to really care about that sort of stuff and more inclined to look within. So, one of the things I used to feel about myself was I always felt like I was different. I was totally unique amongst society. Now, you can feel like you're unique, but you have to ask yourself a question. Unique compared to what? And I kind of had this little epiphany a few weeks ago as of this recording, where I was thinking to myself, like, if I'm different, what am I different compared to? What is the baseline norm for society? And then I asked the obvious question of, who said it? And then I had the other question of, why do I care? And then it kind of hit me like, why am I basing my personal identity based upon something that someone else isn't? And so that's the thing. We don't want to be one of the herd, but, well, that is true. Well, generally, people don't consider themselves part of the herd, I guess is the thing. We often consider humans to be a social animal and stuff like that. And I got to debate the whole idea of humanity being an animal, but that's another conversation entirely. But the idea is, if you don't want to be a member of the herd, do you need to base your identity on not being a member of the herd? Or do you just want to do your own thing and let people do whatever it is they do? And that's when I kind of realized that, if you consider yourself unique, or you consider yourself different, or you consider yourself not part of the crowd, that's a good thing, but don't let that be a basis of your identity, because in all reality, you should be happy with who you are, not in comparison to other people, because other people, their opinions matter to a certain extent, like if they're friends, family, whatever, but if it's just a bunch of randos, why do you care? You don't, live life for yourself, not for what someone else might think of you. Or put another way, don't be different just because someone else acts a certain way. It ultimately doesn't matter, No one wants to be normal, but then again, you have to ask the question of, what is normal? And when you act not normal, then why does it matter? And what exactly is normal, I think, is the main question we should ask. Because, like, when you think normal, you generally think the worst things about people. Normal people are stupid. They don't question anything. Well, who's to say that's normal? That's what some people do. But how much? At what point does some become all or become most? I guess is the best way to look at it. And so instead of just basing your actions or basing your thoughts based upon what someone doesn't do, just be you without having that sort of sense of superiority that comes from saying, I'm better than everyone else. Because it's not really good. It's ultimately a toxic mindset to have, because then you set these unrealistically high expectations for yourself that aren't necessary in the first place. I always had this mindset of, oh, I'm so much better than everyone else. And invariably, I had this anxiety of, well, what if I'm not better? Well, it doesn't matter if you're better than some arbitrary standard or you're better than some random group of people. It doesn't matter. You just have to live your life, and that's it. And at the end of the day, that's what you'd be doing anyway. And that's the thing. When you are an individual, when you're a free-minded person, it doesn't necessarily matter what someone else does or doesn't do. I think a good song lyric that kind of describes this is from, I forget what the band's name is. I think it's not Dragon Force. It's the name of a Dio song. Anyway, the album is The Book of Heavy Metal. The title track is The Book of Heavy Metal, which is a parody song for heavy metal songs. And one of the lyrics in there, the only thing I want is what my parents don't. And that's what I'm basically saying is, don't be like that, or don't base your personality based upon what someone else doesn't do. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter. You just got to be you. Because if you're not you, then you're just going to be setting yourself up for failure. Or setting yourself up for unneeded anxiety, I guess is the best way to put it. And the other thing I want to bring up is, when you're watching YouTube videos, maybe even this one, when you're, ingesting media content, you got to ask yourself, does the person talking actually know what they're talking about? It's one thing, it's another realization I had a couple days ago. I'd read an article, and then I'd watched a video on two similar subjects. And the subjects were, what is going on in today's society? Not because I really cared about the subject matter, because at the end of the day, I am part of today's society, and I don't do what happens in the videos or the article. And it kind of hit me that, doomers, and for those who don't know what a doomer is basically a part of the internet subculture of people who think everything's going to collapse and we're all gonna die. Those people. And I realized doomers do have an interesting degree of similarity to one another. If you look at what a doomer writes versus what a doomer video is like, they sound a lot alike. And it seems they have a lot of the same issues. Because if you look at what people say and what they don't say, and when I say people, I mean this particular subset, you start to realize that they have a very narrow view of things. And I kind of started thinking about that. I kind of moved on from that, because the way I think is I'll move on from one set of details and sort of looking at the broader picture as time goes on. And I kind of realized something. When you look at a YouTube video or you read an article, it really does only represent a very narrow view of anything. So when you see YouTube videos on this is why the world is crazy today, or this is why people are sad today, you have to remember they may not be describing reality. They may actually be describing their interpretation of reality that's based upon a very narrow viewpoint. And I kind of was like, well, maybe they don't know quite what they think they know. One of the things that really comes down to in life is finding any answers is really difficult. Finding out what's actually happening in real life is not as easy as just reading a news article. Even taking bias out of the equation, it's like, what really is happening? What do people really think? And what it comes down to is people think whatever they think. We often like to talk about the herd or the sheeple or stuff like that, but we have to understand that each person is an individual. There aren't people, even the most, I guess, I don't necessarily agree with this concept, but let's just call it generic people that, consume and move on to another product. Even they have their own minds. Even they are still individuals. And people will react to things differently. People will do things differently. Setting trends, I think, is a rather disingenuous way of actively feeling like one is superior to those people. I don't think it actually represents reality. If we look at media, for example, media would say that people have these beliefs, but then we look at the media that caters to these certain beliefs and it fails horribly. But then you bring back Luke Skywalker and people of all ages are like, oh, this is a cool guy. And people may never even heard of Luke Skywalker before, but it fits with an archetype that people generally just like. It's one of those things where people are more complicated than I think people give them. People are more complicated than the media would give them credit for. it's very easy to say, oh, people are stupid. And I say it myself all the time, people are stupid. But the reality is, people react based upon what information they have and what experience level they have. They just might not know any better than what they already know. And when you look at it through that lens, you find the real world is very, very complicated. And that's one thing, everybody wants the answer. Everybody wants a set of answers. And the reality is, as you grow older in life, hopefully, you'll find that there is no answer. There is nothing but just the world as it is. And it's up to you to interpret it in your own way. You have to understand that you'll never know everything. You'll never be able to have an answer for everything. Some things don't even have an answer. And when you get your information, you have to recognize that every piece of information you get has some sort of bias to it. And it's bias filtered through a limited viewpoint. And once you understand that, you'll be able to start picking out little bits of similarities between pieces of media. And this is another thing also that I wanted to point out as well. We often like to talk about, like media got bad here, here, and here. But did it really? Some of it did, some of it didn't, And even then, with media and trends, I already mentioned this earlier, but this ties into that. Media trends don't necessarily reflect reality either. Once again, you have the woke entertainment that people are supposed to like, but it's only really liked, and I use this term loosely, by people who create it. You gotta remember, these creatives all have a narrow viewpoint themselves. They all come from pretty much the same kind of background with some of the same narrow viewpoints. And so you'll see a lot of similarities in the woke entertainment, or just non-woke but more modern entertainment. And that may not necessarily be what audiences really want. Once again, with the return of Luke Skywalker, we can see that the more classically minded stuff people want. They don't necessarily want woke crap. And so, what it all comes down to is this. Whenever you're digesting a piece of media, even this, you have to ask the question of, does the person talking actually know what they're talking about? It seems simple, right? But whenever somebody says something we agree with, or sounds like they know what they're talking about, we often believe what they're saying. But they may not know what they're talking about. They may be just bullshitting you. So you need to watch out for what people are saying and what they're not saying. When it comes to politics, it's very easy to pick up when somebody's literally just saying crap, because they're not saying anything specific. They're like saying, oh, this trend suggests, or oh, this suggests. They won't say definitively, this happened. Or if they do, they'll use it in the most general terms possible, so that you can't just say, well, technically this didn't happen. Oh, well, it kind of happened. That's where the whole my truth kind of concept came from. When you live in a post-truth society, anything can happen, as long as you believe it happened, Or, to quote Seinfeld, it's not a lie if you believe it. It's just one of those things where I don't recommend any sort of politics or any sort of philosophy. I only say have a free mind. Not necessarily an open one where all sort of shit can be pulled in. I'm just saying a free mind where you question everything and you come up with your own conclusion, not simply using the conclusions of others. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, is yet another philosophical ramble by General Lotz. What can I say? I love waxing philosophically about anything and everything. That's one of my favorite things to do. It's one of my favorite hobbies, just to try to figure out the vagaries of life. Back when I was younger, I had this very holier-than-thou, superior mindset. And as I've finally gotten older and finally graduated from being a child to an adult, I've realized that a lot of that was just pseudo-intellectual bullshit. You'll find a lot of that in comics, and some novels. Like some of the popular stuff. I won't say a lot of it. I'll take that back. Some of the more popular philosophical stuff really is nothing but bullshit. Like some of those emo comics from the early 2000s by all the various Garths, like Garth Ennis and Warren Ellis, Those guys, man. It's like, this stuff is so deep, man. Then you read it as an adult, it's like, wow, this is literally just trash. Or like, what was it? I'm trying to think. There was some philosophical thing. Oh, no, I almost had it. Cormac McCarthy, that's the one. Cormac McCarthy, man, if you want to read pseudo-intellectual bullshit, read that. The Road was a film that wasn't bad. It was based on a book. But then there was another book about some guy named The Judge. Man, this is a long time ago. And I had a friend who was just crazy for this one book. And you actually read it, and it's nothing but pseudo-intellectual bullshit that people pick up on. Fight Club, that's also pseudo-intellectual bullshit as well, that people will trumpet to high heaven. And it's like, it is literally just bullshit, you know? It is just something that I think appeals to a certain mindset, and it sounds deep, but it really has such little actual substance to it. I would need to actually delve really deep into Fight Club to really point out the stuff that doesn't really make that much sense when you actually take it both in the context of both the novel and the film and actually compare it to, you know, real life. You know, I guess, like, this has nothing to do with Fight Club, or it may, but, you know, like the idea of consumerism, where people just consume product and move on. Yeah, some people do that, but how many actually do it? And, you know, it's not like it's inevitable that people are just going to do that. I had this mindset back when I was younger where I had this sort of idea, and it was a really stupid one too, where inevitably people would just become normal, which is basically somebody from Idiocracy. Not true at all, but it was this belief I had. And I think, you know, a lot of these works, remember, narrow viewpoint, kind of like Trumpet, that, you know, you'll become this sort of biological machine that will just consume and die. And how true is that of a large population of people? And even if it is true, how does that really apply to you? Unless you do it, it doesn't really matter all that much. It's really just one of those things where, you know, once you really start to peel back the veneer of emotion, because a lot of this stuff is based purely on emotion, not actual any sort of deep thought. Once you peel back that veneer of emotion, you start to realize a lot of this stuff is just crap. Not exactly video games, right? But I guess in terms of video games, 2022, I will definitely try to get Sky Captain, Crimson Sky is out, because that's a game I've been playing a little bit recently, and goddamn is that still good. If only that was ported to Steam. Hell, they got Ninja Gaiden on Steam. Surely you can have bloody Crimson Sky's High Road to Revenge. But in any event, I'm General Lotz. I'm tired. It's July. 4th of July was awesome. Set off a lot of fireworks. Use your brain. We got an epic hand-and-a-half sword. Then I'm going to wish you good Witcher 1, which I still need to finish, and good Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which I've never actually played. Whatever makes you happy.